and welcome back to the Collin Cadmus Podcast. Today I'm joined by Matt Grossbard. Matt graduated from Roger Williams University in 2013 and then joined SinglePlatform as an entry-level salesperson in July as part of the first new hire class that I taught while serving as their head of sales training. After a year of full-cycle sales, Matt was promoted to sales manager and senior sales manager, where he oversaw a team of 10 direct reports before moving into sales leadership roles at Livestream and Electric, where he climbed to senior director of sales before starting his most recent and current venture as VP of sales at Tynrose. Needless to say, we have a long history together, so I'm excited to catch up and get his thoughts on all that's changing in B2B sales, find out what tactics and strategies are working best for him and his team today, and discuss what he's learned in his first year as VP of sales. Before we get started, if you're watching on YouTube, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave us a comment if you have questions or feedback. If you're joining us from Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please drop us a review and let us know what you think of the episode. This is much appreciated. Without further ado, let's dive in and get his thoughts. Matt, thanks for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, man. It's super excited to be here.
It's been a long time, brother. And
yeah,
I was just saying before we started, like it's like single platform DNA. Like we don't age very much. We look a little older, but like we're not aging. I feel like baby boomers. There's something with the millennial generation. You're a millennial, right? Or actually, you might be. Are you Gen Z?
I'm 34. I was born in 1990. So I think millennial.
I think you're a millennial. Yeah. You're a millennial. I'm an old millennial, so I guess I'm sort of on the cusp. I'm 86, but yeah, man, it's been a long time. I've been obviously following your journey and everyone's journey on LinkedIn, but let's catch up, man. I mean, walk me through. You know, before we get started, I mean, I've got questions here that I want to dive into. I want to cover some of the topics I've been going through, and then get a sense of what's working for you guys. But before we do that, catch me up, like walk me through your career a little bit. You know, obviously you were at SinglePlatform, and for those who don't know, if you haven't listened to a previous episode, SinglePlatform was where I started entry-level sales and then grew into a training role. And then Matt was part of, I think it was the first class that I officially hired and trained. I think maybe there was one class where like Adam did part of it and I sort of was learning, or maybe that was your class. I can't really remember specifically, but you were either the first or the second, because I started in the role, I want to say in June, and you joined in July. So it's a while ago, and I hired, it was like 150 people in 9 months. We were on this crazy spree. So it all in my memory like is mushed together. But yeah, walk me through. I mean, you know, you started entry-level sales, you climbed the ranks at SinglePlatform, and it was about like a year, right? Like this perfect promotion sort of path. And then you left, right? And what happened from there?
Yeah. So not only was I in your first training class, but I think I was the worst person in that training class. And
I do remember that, by the way.
Dragged me through training in the first few weeks to make sure I could figure out what I was doing. So, you know, it was a mix of, I think, you and Matt Bress and Chris Thompson that all kind of were like, we're not going to let you fail. Just trust in us and we'll get you to where you need to go. I think I had to make about 2x the number of calls that everybody else did to get the same results. But you guys got me there. So
I'm glad you said it, because I wasn't going to bring that up. Yeah. But I do remember it. And I'll tell you why I remember it, because I have, you know, I think back to SinglePlatform. It's like so much happened in such a condensed amount of time that I think I have just very selective memories of it all, like little like pockets of it sort of. But I do remember, because I remember sort of perspectives of like where I was sitting in the office. And I remember sitting in this back row at one point when you started to catch your groove. And I just remember the celebration that we had in that moment, because it was something that happened, whether it was you closed a deal or you like crushing there was just something that happened where it was like, that's it, man. Like you just fucking did it. Right. And it was that smile, and we were all just celebrating. I can't remember the exact scenario. You may actually remember it. It might've been the gong rip or something, but like it was that moment where it just clicked. And I also specifically remember that moment for Annie McKay, who also had a similar, like really just slow start, couldn't figure it out, but then just like dominated this one call and was a savage from there on out. Like maybe you remember the specifics of it, but I'm glad you brought that up, because you were a testament to like, just keep doing it, trust the process, and when it clicks, it will click. And it did. And the rest was history.
Yeah. And thank goodness that I had you guys there to coach me up and train me and get me to that place. You could put in all the effort in the world, you know, in something like that. If you're not being taught how to do it the right way, it's obviously very difficult to figure out. So big shout out to all you guys for hanging in there with me. But yeah, I think, like anything else, if you put in the work and you put in the effort, you put in the energy and the focus, eventually you're going to get the results.
And
Luckily,
trust the process. If there's a process,
yeah,
if you know there's a process that works, right? That's the thing. Like if you're, I don't want to confuse AEs. If you're at a company where like the process not working for anyone, trusting the process can be a slippery slope. But that was not the case at SinglePlatform. We had a process that was very proven. So like if you failed, it's because you just couldn't do it or weren't doing it, right?
Totally.
And so I mean, you put your head down, dude. And I remember you grinding away. I remember you getting frustrated. Like I have visual sort of memories of that. And then I just remember the big breakthrough, and like it was just all downhill from there.
Yeah, and what a great place. I mean, the people, the training, the energy, that is a place that set up a lot of people for really successful careers thus far. So thankful that I got lucky and got a job there and learned everything that I did. And I was there for about 4 years. I went from
longer than me,
an individual contributor for a year, got promoted to a manager where I was running a full cycle team. And then I actually shifted over to the SDR world and ran all the hiring and all the training for all of our new hires.
Oh, because SinglePlatform built an SDR team after.
Yeah, so that was the first SDR team. So Pete was kind of like, hey, thinking of this idea, like we want you to kind of run it. So I built that out. Was
the idea there? Sorry, I'm cutting you off because I'm now curious because this happened after I left, but was the idea there that maybe we could retain our closers longer?
Yeah, retain your closers longer. And then also, for me, being somebody who kind of had that deer in headlights feel for the first few weeks, giving people a little bit more of like, let's ease into this. Like, let's just go and master the hardest part of the job, which is cold calling. And in that world, hyper transactional sale, you're making a sale a day, trying to create 10 meetings a day, hold 5 demos, right? Like that cycle we used to call it. You'd get the little bat if you hit the cycle. But getting people to the place where they can master the hardest part of this, if you could do the cold calling there, you could do everything else there.
Yeah.
So getting them it was a 3-month SDR program, which is so funny now when you think about the way things work, right? But it was 3 months as an SDR, you hit a certain number, and then you go graduate to a full cycle team. So I did kind of, what you were doing. I did all the hiring and all the training and all that, which was such a great experience.
It was really hard. This is going to sound like I'm patting myself on the back. I don't want it to come out that way, but it was really hard training full cycle in such high volume of people. I remember like the first month I did it, we would do like the 2 weeks of training, then we would get them out onto the floor, and they would start making calls and whatnot. Where it got really difficult was the next month I had another class come in. And so then I would be downstairs. We had on the second floor or whatever floor that was, right? Yeah. And then we had people upstairs that were trying to learn a full cycle sales process. And this was before we had like other training managers. So yeah, I mean, I would imagine, because I hired 150 roughly people. So by the time you got into management, things were way more complicated because there's so many people.
Right. Yeah. Right? I mean, it was definitely that, kind of like throw the bird out of the nest and let's see who can fly type thing. Right. And even with the SDRs, it was 5 days in a classroom, you're hiring kids mostly with zero experience, fresh out of college. It's like, go be a professional, go do this job. So, great experience. Ended up becoming a senior manager where I oversaw, 5 or 6 managers that had direct teams.
You were overseeing managers. I want to put that in the intro. I didn't know that. Sorry.
Yeah, so I know you had Joe Brown on here a couple of weeks ago. So Joe was one of the guys who I managed, which was awesome. Learned from him. Hopefully, he learned a little bit from me. So cool to see everything that he's doing now. But yeah, so manage some managers, and then everybody. It's at a certain point in that hyper transactional sale, you get to a place where you say, hey, like I want to go see what else is out there. I want to go learn and experience something new. So when I left Electric, I took a job at an organization called Livestream. And the main reason that I went to Livestream was that Sam Jacobs, who's, running Pavilion now, he was their CRO. And I said, man, that's right, I could learn from this guy.
Was that after he left Axial? Or that was probably before? That might have been. Actually,
I think that might have been after.
Before.
I'm not sure. We got to go check the timeline. But all I knew was that as a young guy, he had it figured out, and I wanted to go learn from Sam. So I took a role. Oversaw their SMB and their SDR program there, and I was there for about a year. And what I realized was that with my inexperience being, only working at single platform, being, God, 24, 25, I didn't really know how to look at the intricacies of a business and really understand the sales process and all that type of stuff. So I went into Livestream thinking, this is a startup. We're going to grow this thing. In reality, they were a couple months away from an exit. They ended up getting bought out by Vimeo, about a year and a half after I started. So a year in, they started to make some changes, and I ended up leaving the organization. And this is where my career I got really, really lucky.
Let's pause there for 1 second, because I just want to jump into that for a second, because that's not an unusual experience. And maybe the details will always pan out a little bit differently, but it was this very similar thing for me. Like when I left single platform, went to doctor.com, you kind of leave with like this, it's maybe an ignorance, like it's a veil sort of, right? Like it's like you're just sort of, I think I'll compare it to dating again, which, sales always works really well there. But like in dating, I always say to people, like, the reason you want to take your time, get to know someone is because you go into dating with like this wishful thinking and you meet someone on the first date. First date goes great. But what we do is we fill in the blanks of all the things we don't know with exactly how we hope it will work out. All the things we don't know about the person, we hope that, we just fill in the blanks that it will be the way we want it to be. Oh no, of course they don't snore. Oh no, of course they don't leave a mess in the kitchen. Oh no, of course they don't do all the things that will annoy me. And then slowly you get to know them and you find out like these things aren't true and whatnot. And so like, it was very similar for me leaving one company going to the next, because it's so easy, especially when you've only done it once, to just make a lot of assumptions. And then it sounds like you get there and you're like, wait a minute. Oh, so like, there's different stages and like things are very different at these different stages, and like what's actually like a totally different job, and like and so you kind of lived through that too. So don't feel bad. I wanted to harp on that just to prepare anyone who's listening. Like
do
it's
your
never
research.
the same.
Understand what you're getting involved with. Different people for different stages, right? Different sales cycles. Is this a 9-month sales cycle, or is this a 30-day sales cycle, or a week-long sales cycle, right? Like really understanding all of that stuff is critical. And I think that one of the most humbling and most important lessons that I learned from going to Livestream is that I think when you leave a place like Single Platform, where you're getting promoted every year, that sale like the back of your hand. It's a script. You know how to run this play. It's like breathing at that point. I left Single Platform thinking I knew way more than I actually did. I knew a lot about that sale. I did not know a lot about the sales world in general, and the business world in general. So I struggled at Livestream in certain components of that, because I was trying to make it Single Platform when it wasn't, and not shoving a square peg into a round hole. And I think that's a lesson that a lot of people are going to learn. Hopefully they can learn it from listening to something like this. But if they experience it, that's okay, as long as you're willing to acknowledge that and learn from that experience.
Bingo.
When I left Livestream, I got really lucky and I got a job at Electric. And Electric was at the time a 5 or 6 person company. It was 2017. The company had been around for a couple months. They had a couple customers, lots of founder-led sales, friends and family type signups. But they kind of brought me in as the first salesperson to build out the playbook, figure out what was going to work, build and grow and scale a team.
So this was early stage, right? So let me make sure.
Earliest stage, seed round.
Got it. So you do Single Platform. And so people understand Single Platform was a weird situation because it was early stage, but it also just got acquired for $100 million, which is like a ridiculous multiple, right? Like it was doing very little revenue. So we were sort of living in these two worlds of hypergrowth startup, but also having the comfort of acquisition. But from a sales perspective, everything was figured out. So we came in and just had to learn a process. And I think that's the big thing is like when you go somewhere else, you maybe have to learn it and figure it out, right? And they're different stages there. Yeah. And so I would just to back up on that one piece, I'd say if anyone ends up in that situation where you're going to your next company, I don't want to say take 6 months to not do anything, but take time to learn what's different. Like sit down with the reps. Like really don't come in thinking on day one that you have any useful advice for anyone, because you really don't. they will have more useful advice for you until you learn everything that they're doing. I think that's a good way to put it.
I 100% agree. That was the mistake that I made at Livestream. I came in and said, everything we do here is wrong. This is how we're going to do it.
I did at doctor.com too. Don't feel bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the learning experience. And without my time at SinglePlatform, I would not have been successful at Livestream or Electric. Without my time at Livestream, I would have 100% failed at Electric in 6 months. No doubt. So it was a necessary, massively important stop kind of on my journey as a sales leader.
That makes perfect sense. And so you go into the entry level, or not entry level, but early stage role. You're kind of writing the script, you're figuring it out, you're testing it. You're the only person doing it, right? Like we
had one sales rep who had just started, who was there to be helpful, make some calls, do that type of stuff. But largely,
so you had a little bit of team camaraderie going on there. So did you start with like a single platform-esque process? Was that the starting point? Because why not?
So there were components of it. I think that from like an outbound model, as you think about cold calling and things like that played a very big role in our ability to go build pipeline.
Yeah.
I think that it was a mix of single platform, but I took a lot of what I learned from Livestream because that was more of a relevant sale, right? And Electric was selling more or less a managed service provider type software / services offering, right? So
Livestream was like boot camp getting you ready for this.
Totally.
That's what it seems like.
Livestream sold, hardware, software. You had to understand wiring and where the event was going to be and all this type of stuff. And now I go into this thing where, hey, this is also a technical sale, but I was ready for it, right? I understood.
You saw the end goal.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You saw like, here's the maturity of the company and now like you take Electric and get it there, right?
Right, exactly.
So that's cool, yeah.
So at Electric, we did, I immediately went into kind of the network and was like, who is the right person to kind of come and do this with me? Went back to my single platform / Pearl River roots and grabbed Matt Deese and was like, come on, man, like do this with me. And he kind of took that leap of faith and he ended up being there with me for like 5 or 6 years. But having him there to kind of say, test this for me, let me know this feedback. What do you think? And just having somebody as an AE who I knew was going to be a future leader in the organization, but at the time was willing to kind of like be in the mud and in the dirt and figure it all out with me. Having him there was huge.
That's that founding AE that I call him.
Totally. Yeah. And they're so insanely critical to be a successful VP because what happens is as a VP, or a head of sales at the time, you need to figure out so much stuff. There's only so many hours a day. We were working 14, 15 hours a day, and I still did not have time to run nearly as many discos and demos and all that kind of stuff to figure out what works. So to have a founding AE that you really trust and that is going to do a good job is critical.
Yeah, we were lucky at Single Platform because like Adam and Wiley did that for us basically. Right. And I think that the DNA of that was sort of like Wiley was a salesperson, right? So I think he was just he wanted to sell things before he built them, all that sort of stuff. So, but I think there's other founders out there. I don't know at Electric or whatnot, but was it a more technical founder?
Ryan Denny, who is awesome. I learned so much from him in my time there. And he's doing a great job with that org still today. He was more on like the sales side, but being the industry that we are in, he did have enough technical knowledge, but he was not the coding guy, the product guy. He was more of like the business operator. So I think he did lean a little bit more to the sales side of things.
Oh, good. Was he working with you in the early days, like on sort of figuring out what the right go-to-market motion is?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I was extremely fortunate with Ryan was that he kind of looked at a 24-year-old guy who could like talk a little bit and was like, here are the keys, man. Like, go figure it out. He was there to give feedback and help with deal management and help with go-to-market strategy and totally work with me. But unearned trust, really, and it ended up working out. We got it to, we did the triple, double thing over the course of the 4 years.
Nice.
But he really trusted me early on he allowed me to make mistakes and figure things out. So he was a huge part of our success early on in figuring things out, but he also was not afraid to say like, what do you think? Let's do it.
All I think I remember from Electric was because I checked out the website, I want to say, when you started working there. It had like Biggie Smalls on it and stuff. And it was like
Yeah.
it was really cool, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, listen, I don't know if anybody will say that like the IT, outsourced IT MSP space is the most sexy thing in the world. And one of the things that Electric did a really good job of is making it cool, and
I
whether that was
remember
like
that.
cool
I remember
colors and
really
branding
liking that.
or,
Yeah.
yeah, like having Biggie Small sitting behind a computer on our website, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that type of stuff, that type of like crafty branding, where we didn't have to go pay tens of thousands of dollars to put that together. But it got attention, and it kind of made us stand out a little bit. All that stuff is important and fun.
And I remember thinking they must have spent a decent chunk of change on that artwork because it looks custom. Yeah. So
I don't know
it
about
was
that,
well
but it did look
executed.
cool.
It was
Yeah,
well
for sure.
executed. Yeah, it did. It looked really cool. But all right, so let's jump. So that gives me a good sense of sort of what's led up to everything. But what was the departure to from Electric into Tynrose? And
Yeah.
maybe
So
you
I was
want
at
to
Electric.
clarify too, because your LinkedIn will say one company. Like, why don't you clarify what's going on
Yeah,
there?
for
Yeah.
sure. So I was at Electric for 7 years. And, for the first 2 years, I was more or less running all revenue. And then we made this great, incredible hire. We hired a guy named David Weiner to come in and be the VP of sales. We had gotten it from 0 to 10, and now we needed somebody to really help us get from like 10 to 40, right? 10 to 50. And he was absolutely the best hire for that. And for me as a professional, it was so important for my development. The reason why I'm comfortable and confident sitting in the seat that I am today is because I got to watch, and learn from David.
Hmm.
Um,
How long
so
did you get to stay sort of overlapped with him there?
we probably overlapped for like 3.5 years or
Oh
so.
wow. Okay. So it wasn't so
Yeah,
they did not bring him in to replace you. They brought him in to top you, to mentor you, coach you,
totally.
train you, manage you, and you got to
Yeah.
learn from him for a long stretch.
Yeah. And it was always the plan, right? Like my job was to help us get from like 1 to 10. And then, my knowledge at that point was going to top out.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's, as a sales leader, if I had to give advice for people who are dealing with that situation is if you feel like you're ready for that next phase, then go look somewhere else or have that conversation. I knew that I needed to learn more. I was not ready to get us from 10 to 100. That was out of my wheelhouse. And I think understanding your strengths and weaknesses at that point in your career is really critical and important. So bringing in David to me was like, this is awesome. I get to learn from this guy who had done it before. Awesome guy. He's going to teach me so much. And he really helped me progress my career as a leader and an overall professional. So always the plan. And, between myself and Deese and David and a bunch of other, leadership that we brought on, we got that thing to 40 million in recurring revenue.
Wow.
So it was a ride. We hit unicorn status. We are a $1.2 billion valuation. And things were going great. But what an incredible ride there. It is the best career move that I've made in my path and journey so far. And so thankful for that time and everybody on that team.
That's the way to do it. For any founders who are listening, what you just described is the dream scenario, I would say, right? And maybe you could say you wish you didn't end up at Livestream, but I think you realize you learned a ton
Needed
there.
it.
You needed it. Yeah, it was the perfect sort of like bridge to the next stop. But what happens very often in the industry is they get to that, you do the 0 to 10 million, let's call that first stage. And then they're sort of like ready. We need VP of sales or we need CRO. We need this next level. And what happens often is they fire the existing leader and they just bring in someone new. And like, it's always a mistake. And I know why they do it. They want to save the money. They're like, we don't need two leaders right now. We just need one leader with more experience. And they end up losing all the momentum, all the training and everything that you've acquired. And it's a huge, stab in the back to the person who is now on their way out because you never get to learn. And so the right way to do it, and I hear Lemkin say this a lot, is like don't replace someone, just top them. Like
Yeah.
if they've reached their maximum, bring someone in on top of them who knows more. They're going to need people under them anyway. So don't get rid of what you had. Like bring a VP on top of the director, bring a CRO on top of the VP or an SVP or whatever. And like that's how people get to grow. And I got to say, just even having this conversation with you, I mean, it's been many years since we spoke, but I mean, the level of polish, the way you speak, like you can tell that you have been working with very smart people since I've last seen you. Like, and it's the same for everyone, right? But like, it's fascinating because we haven't talked. Like, it's like a night and day, like before and after. You can just see the level of growth is tremendous. And so it doesn't surprise me that you basically spent the last 10, 15 years or however long it's been around some really smart people getting mentored and in a really good situation, I would say, for the most part.
Yeah, well, thank you. Super kind. And yeah, look, man, it's like if you surround yourself with successful, smart people, you're going to learn from them if you're open to doing so.
Gloves off.
And yeah, of course,
Yeah.
man. It's like you are who you surround yourself with, right?
Yep.
And I think that I got extremely lucky in some cases. But also you got to keep putting in the work, and if you learn something, go implement it, right? Don't be the guy who thinks you know more than you do, and that's how you continue to grow and get better, especially in this like ever changing sales landscape. Sales is very different today as I start talking about Tynrose a little bit as it was when I started at Electric in 2017. It's a totally different game that we're playing now. We're all really good athletes, but you got to learn how to play the game that the game at hand, right? Some years are football, some years are basketball, some years are swimming. It really all depends on the landscape. So consistently changing and evolving is important.
Well, kudos to you for having the self-awareness to know what you don't know, and then being smart enough to figure out how and where to learn it, because a lot of people, a lot of what happens in sales is like we tend to back ourselves into corners because it's the nature of being a salesperson. And so we're always like, I can do my boss's job. I can do my CEO's job. And you end up in some of these interviews or whatever, and you pitch it. And sometimes we're like, oh shit, dude, what did I just sign up for? Like, I actually have no clue what I'm doing. Right.
Yeah.
But to have the self-awareness is huge. And I think it's been clear that you've done that since the start of your career. And it's just been like climbing a ladder, like boom, boom, boom. And not just like title wise, but knowledge wise. So kudos, man. Let's jump into the good stuff. I want to dive in here, or actually, I just want to make sure I understand. So the company you're at, Tynrose, because your LinkedIn will say, now I'm drawing a blank on the other Contango. Yeah. What's going on there? Explain how that works.
Yeah. So I joined Tynrose last March. So I've been here for about a year. And what Tynrose is we are a roll-up managed service provider. Right. So what we are doing, and I'm sure there's a more articulate way to phrase that, but the reality, what we are doing in general is we are trying to make digital transformation and overall IT management more accessible and scalable across the country for all these SMBs. Right. So for us, what we are doing is we are trying to go out and identify small, medium-sized managed service providers that are giving their customers this unbelievable experience. They're helping them. They're doing all the right things. Their customers like them. They're happy, but they don't really know how to grow the org past a certain place. So what we are doing is we're acquiring these organizations. We're sticking in our exec team.
Owned by private equity? Is that who put this together?
So our CEO's name is Bill Tyndall. It is a bootstrap company, so there's no PE backing or VC backing. We work with a family office who helps us with the funding for the acquisitions, but there's no PE or VC backing and things like that.
Got it. Okay, so is he looking for sort of like fire sales? Like, is he out there looking for good deals where like, hey, it's sort of like a Marcus Lemonis, but SaaS type thing?
It's not necessarily that. It's more so of an organization that is doing a great job, but maybe they've been doing this for 10, 15 years and they can't get it past a certain place, right? And with my knowledge from Electric, Bill is also an old Electric guy. We've kind of seen the playbook on how to grow and scale these things. So
Contango a lot of them out there, right?
There's hundreds.
We bought one when I was at Doctor.com. We acquired a company called Connect Healthcare. And they were basically doing the same thing as us, similar, but to the like enterprise, like to hospitals and health systems. Yeah. And we bought them for like $4 or $5 million, I want to say. And they had this great business making all this money, but the founders were old and just didn't care. And they were just like taking the money and not really caring. And so all the employees were like, we need better leadership. And so we were able to broker this deal. We were like, hey, like, let's make the founders rich. Let you guys go retire. You can maybe even keep some equity in Doctor.com. and we'll take this thing over and everyone will be happy. And it was like a win-win-win for everyone. So there's probably a lot of those opportunities out there.
100%. And for us, it's all about service deliverability, right? Like we want to acquire and work with organizations that do a really, really good job and treat their customers the right way. So made our first acquisition in last March. That was Contango. Over the last year, we've been growing that business, increasing bookings, increasing gross margins.
So do you now focus on Contango? Is they sort of going to move you as needed? Like
exactly. So for right now, the focus is fully on Contango because that was our first acquisition. I can't get too much into the details, but we're very close to making our second acquisition and in talks with a third as well. Cool. So there's a lot going on in the back end here, and more or less from a revenue standpoint, what will happen is it will be one sales team managed, across the board, running a similar process, running the same play, all kind of reporting up, to myself.
This is going to get interesting. This is going to be, it's just going to get harder every year a little bit.
Yep, but for sure.
In some ways it may get easier because it's like building blocks, right? Like you build certain things, it gets easier. But the complexity of your sales offering is going to get more challenging.
Yeah, more services, right? Different scope of support, different softwares, different applications. And the end goal here is for us to say, how do we deliver, these incredible experiences at scale?
Yep.
And the more we can kind of push into this middle and give that service to everybody, the better it is for all of our customers.
Boom. All right. So that makes sense because I was confused on that at first, but
yeah.
It sounds like you're going to get to just sort of keep continuing your massive learning trajectory here because
for sure
it's never going to be one day of the same thing as yesterday at this company, probably. So that's pretty cool. All right, let's dive into the first question here, which I want to get your thoughts on. And I've been sort of playing around with like how to frame this question because I was originally asking, what's broken with the outbound model and how did we get here? But I want to sort of reframe it and I'm playing around a little bit. So thinking back to start of your sales career, single platform, super repeatable process, all that sort of stuff, and to where we've evolved to today. Is something broken there? Like there's this whole debate of like outbound sales is broken. Obviously it's not black and white. It's not like really one thing or the other, but like, is something broken, dead, or dying? If so, like what is it and how? What are your thoughts there? What has sort of evolved? And then the next question, just so you know, is we're going to jump into like what's working today. But first, get me caught up to speed on what you think with the outbound model. Like what elements of it have died, if at all? What's going on there?
Oh, it's a great question. I won't say broken, dead, or dying, but I'll say that it is extremely challenging right now, and it is harder than it has ever been. Going back to like 2017, we hired like our first few classes at Electric. Hey, go source 30 accounts a day, 5 contacts per account. 2 of them go into a custom email sequence. The other one's going to automated. Let's bang 100 phone calls. And guess what? We're creating a meeting a day, 2 meetings a day. That is it's just not the reality anymore, right? When you think about connection rates on cold calls, so just somebody answering, 5%. If you think about email replies, 1%. So what is that a function of? That's a function of one, just like noise and space, right? Spam phone calls, there's everybody sending out all these bulk emails.
A lot of volume, right?
A lot of volume in the space, so the noise. And then also, think about when you used to pick up a number, you used to pick up your phone and dial it to an office, you were going to talk to somebody because there was a receptionist or a secretary or an office manager that would answer the phone. Now we're playing the game, right? Who should I be speaking to? Can you connect me? Can you write a note on a sticky note, leave it on their desk? All the tricks and tactics, right?
A lot of them don't even have corporate phone numbers anymore.
They don't exist. Now, 95% of the calls that you're making are people's cell phones.
Yeah.
Those are just naturally going to get picked up far less. So I think that's one piece.
And that's gotten really bad, right? Sorry, I'm cutting you off, but you're hitting on all these the huge parts. Like I've noticed the last few years, like it's just getting people to answer their cell phone. It's like, and for me personally, I keep my phone on Do Not Disturb all day. I almost think we can blame Apple for like all these fancy like focus modes no one turns their phone on anymore. Like,
Yeah, and if they do, you see the unknown number come through, and it's like I'm
yeah,
probably going to guess this is one of 10 spam calls or sales calls that I'm gonna get today. I always try to pick up if I'm not in a meeting because I feel like, all right, if I'm going to pick up for this guy, maybe somebody will pick up for my guys, right? Try to get that good juju going.
cold call karma.
Exactly. Yeah, try to get the good karma going, but that's just the reality of it, right? And then you have Gmail and O365, the number of filters and ways that they're identifying, sales emails. It's just hard to get your email to land in an inbox.
Yeah,
That's like the first challenge. How do I just make sure this thing doesn't end up in spam, right?
yeah,
So, all of those things make it extremely difficult to be successful in the traditional outbound model. How do you make that effective? I think that I know we're going to talk in a little bit about like sales tools, but like if you're going to make cold calls, you have to use a parallel dialer. I'm not going to hound my guys to make 60 calls, 100 calls for them to talk to 5 people, right? They got to make 200 calls a day. It's going to take them all, mostly all day, right? Parallel dialer, we can bang that out in 45 minutes. So it's I think all like using, something like Clay for, customization at scale, or, we'll talk about AI in a little bit, but using ChatGPT for account selection and contact information and, customization at scale, you can still do these things, but you have to be more tactical because with the conversion rates, your volume has to go up, but you can't spend 15 hours a day doing it on your own. You need to be able to use tools to help you do that at scale.
got it. So, is there more you want to throw in there? Because that's basically the second question, which is like, what's actually working for you guys today? So, obviously, evolving towards just using better tools, right? Like, how can we do more with less? Obviously, there's the sales engagement tools, which we didn't have at SinglePlatform. Or maybe did you guys start using those when you started the SDR team?
We had like the click to call, and that was about it. But we weren't emailing back
Or you
then.
weren't, you still weren't emailing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Listen, I think what's working is finding ways to do the traditional outbound model at scale, right? I have always going to be a fan and an advocate of cold calling because if we train our people the right way, the way that I think about cold calling is if I get you on the phone or one of my guys gets you on the phone, now we're kind of in like this one-on-one game of basketball, right? It's like, I think my guy can score, right? Because he's trained on how to do it the right way. We don't want to schedule people with meetings that aren't the right fit for us. But if we're identifying they're the right fit and call me back, send me an email, I think my guy's going to be able to get around that and put the ball in the hoop, right? So I want to put my guys in a position to be successful. I think getting somebody on the phone is a great way to do that. I think that, we use multiple channels of communication. I'm drawing a blank on the name, but there's a Will Smith movie where it's him and Margot Robbie, and they are basically Focus. And there's a scene in Focus where he's at the Super Bowl and he's in this suite, and he more or less tricks this guy he says, hey, pick any number on the field and my girlfriend will pick it. Right now, what you're like, this is crazy. How is this guy going to win this bet? What you don't know is that all day they've been putting the number 77 everywhere that he goes.
Yeah.
He's also been doing it to his girlfriend, right? So when they go to see the number, they both think 77. That's how we kind of think about our general outbound. We want to be everywhere that our prospects are and where they're looking. So whether that is LinkedIn, text messaging, cold calling, personalized emails, voice notes, whatever you need to do to be where your customers are, you have to have good messaging. It has to make sense for them, but you have to have multiple channels of communication in order to get people's attention. So that's working for us really well on like the traditional sense of outbound. We also need to realize that in 2025, that alone is not going to get you enough pipeline. You have to be willing to do alternate things. So for us, networking events, right? Hey, I'm going to go invite 10 COOs to a dinner in New York City or a bar in the city to go get, for happy hour drinks. Just getting out in front of people, creating like real relationships where how can I help them, right? First thing I always try, how can I help you, right? Is there somebody that we might work with that you could work with? And I try to get them help right away. But by forming these relationships, by helping out other people, by meeting other people in the community, it only takes one or two of those like warm intros a quarter to help somebody get to their number, right? And being able to generate those by just networking and building relationships has been really, really effective for us as well. And then I think like account selection. So, we used to call every restaurant from a pizzeria in Alaska to like a bagel shop in New York City to the 5-star Michelin restaurant, right? It didn't matter.
I'm guilty of trying to skip over the Chinese restaurants in my list.
Yeah, for sure, right? Or the pizzerias that you didn't want to get cursed out by. But not every account is created equal, right? You have to understand your ICP. You have to understand the triggers that might get ready for somebody to buy. So whether that's fundraising, hiring, whether that's a LinkedIn post that they make, you have to be consistently on the lookout for that type of stuff. That's a great way to get in the door for obviously really customized, personalized messaging. But what's way easier is I know an AE that works at this company. Hey, man, here's what I'm doing. Who handles that for you today? Can you help me out with an intro? And just getting that introduction from somebody that works in the organization, we don't know if they're the right fit yet. We don't know if they're going to fit our ICP. We don't know if they're in the market for this, but I get to find out. And I think like whether it's people, customers leaving their old job and going to a new job, right? Like a trigger for that, whether it's, somebody that works at the company, whether it's a friend who knows somebody who works at the company, getting like those warm intros is just such a massive part of this today. We know we can sell it really well. We know that we're a great fit for most companies. We just got to get our foot in the door. And that's a really effective way that we've been able to do it.
Cool. So it sounds like if I just were to try to zoom out and say like from that explanation, like what's the big change? And it aligns really well with, largely what we've all been saying really, which is it's the sales doesn't change. It's sort of the channels in which we use to communicate that kind of changes, right? Like if you go back, like people used to knock on your door and like shake your hand. And then we started just picking up the phone and then we started shooting emails. And now this is just a big migration to social media. Like I think that's what's basically happening is like people ignore their cell phone. They don't have an office phone most of the time. And maybe they check their email, but there's lots of spam filters and all that stuff. And it's like social media is the next platform, I think, where most sales and commerce is going to take place. And what's strange is that it seems like even now that it's like it picking up momentum, it still seems like people are dragging their feet at like using it as a real sales channel. And, it goes back to what you just said, like be everywhere that your prospects are, right? And so there's plenty of companies where your prospects maybe are not on LinkedIn or they're not, restaurant owners wouldn't be on LinkedIn, for example. But they're going to be somewhere on social, right? I don't think there's a group of people that's not on one of those platforms, at least, whether it's X or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or LinkedIn. Reddit. Yeah. Or Quora. I guess Quora is maybe kind of dying out, but we're
looking everywhere and we're trying to be everywhere. So it's a big undertaking. You have to have people who really want to work at this. I think that for like cold outbound, you have to have a team who's willing to get in the mud and in the trenches and like wants to put in the work to do it. It is not for the faint of heart right now. I use the analogy of like fishing all the time. Is like you might have to cast out 100 times to get one bite.
Yeah.
You got to be willing to do that because that's the reality of it. It's not make 10 phone calls, get 3 meetings anymore. It's touch 150 accounts in this hyper detailed, hyper strategic way, and you might get a meeting.
Yeah, find a way to do more with less. I know everyone says that, but like it really is be in more places at once. Like even at SinglePlatform, it's probably not just as simple as pick up the phone 100 times a day now. Like there's probably some other motions I would think mixed into that, maybe even some social selling and whatnot. But so you mentioned a few tools in there. So we basically covered the first couple of questions there. You mentioned a few tools in there. We don't need to go through your whole stack or whatnot, but I wanted to start asking people, like, do you have favorites? Do you have like must-have tools in your stack? I know you mentioned like a parallel dialer and whatnot. Do you have any must-haves, or you mentioned Clay as well? Anything that, you're like blown away by and it must be in your tech stack?
So I know you very often talk about like growth at all costs. We are the polar opposite of that. So our tech stack is about as simple as it gets right now. We use our Salesforce for CRM. We use Outreach. We use Zoom Info. We use LinkedIn Navigator. In the past, I've used Gong. I love Gong. I think that it's great from a deal management standpoint, and then also a coaching standpoint. We use Fireflies and things like that instead. It's, another version of that. Mm-hmm. The parallel dialers, we're looking at a couple of them. We've free trialed a bunch. Orem seems to be like the big player in that space.
Everyone's talking about it. Yeah. Colin's the man over there.
I think the big thing is like people are talking about it because everyone's realizing kind of what we just spoke about, which is like, I know cold calling is effective when I get my guys on the phone, but it's not worth the full day for 4 conversations. How do I get more of those conversations going? So
have you tested it yet? The actual parallel dialer with them?
We've tested a couple. I don't know if we've tested Orem yet, but
is there still like a delay? Like that's what I remember was the problem.
It's not bad anymore.
Because we tested some junk at SinglePlatform.
Yeah, I mean
that was back in the day.
Right? Yeah. It's insignificant, I would say. You got to kind of be focused and locked in to make sure that you're kind of accepting the call quickly.
But needs to be high volume, right? Like you need to be able to just jump.
Got to have that trade-off. I'm fine with having that trade-off for a little bit of a lag to actually speak to 10 people in an hour versus 5 people in 4 hours, right? So give me that trade-off all day. It's not going to impact your ability to get that meeting for the most part. Everybody knows you're calling them to schedule a meeting to sell them something at this point. The delay is not going to, impede them from taking that meeting with you.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned growth at all costs, and I had taken that question out because I've covered it ad nauseum. But do you have any thoughts there after having sort of been through? It sounds like a little bit of both.
Yeah. I think growth at all cost, my experience with growth at all cost is, and I think that when you're doing it, you don't know you're doing it, right? Like I think also it goes with the flow of the economy.
Until you've done bootstrap.
Yeah.
If you've done bootstrap first and then you go to growth at all costs, you're like, what are we doing? Right. We're just spending money. When I went to Aircall, the first time my CEO had to sit me down and like have a stern sort of like direct conversation with me was maybe the first week on the job. It was our one-on-one or whatnot. And he like brought this up and he's like, why are you spending? I can't remember how he worded it, but he's like, are you spending time renegotiating our contract with Salesforce? I'm like, yeah, you guys are getting totally ripped off. Of course I am. He's like, I didn't hire you to do that. I'm like, it's easy. Like I can save you 20%. Like you're overpaying. No, Collin, you need to get focused. Like I hired you to do this. We're not worried about money like that here. Like you're going to spend your time and I'm paying you this much and you're going to save this. And it was like, whoa, like it was like this complete like eye-opening experience for me because this was the priority at doctor.com was like, never spend money you don't need to spend and like be efficient, all this stuff. And it was just eye-opening for me that like he genuinely did not want me spending time on that, even if it meant reducing our cost, because he literally wanted me spending my time on other things. Like, and that was eye-opening for me. That was the big like, whoa, it's very different.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest differences is around like planning. And as you think about like forecasting and putting together your sales plan for the year, I think with like a growth at all cost model, it's way easier to say, okay, what do we want to hit? All right. How much money do we need to invest into marketing in order to generate this percentage of pipeline at this close rate, which will drive this much revenue? Can our AEs/SDRs make up the remainder? It's pretty simple then, right? Like marketing is going to be a fixed number based on a budget that they have. Growth at all costs, you can just crank up that budget a little bit if you need to. In the bootstrap world, it's not that. It's, hey, how do we do more with less, right? Maybe you don't have a marketing department. It's saying, hey, here's the maximum budget that we can spend on marketing. What do you think you can drive from that, right? How much can we do outbound? And then putting those numbers together being, I think we can get to this place at this year. Now, the reason why you can do that is because you don't have a VC, board or anybody saying, we need you to, triple growth this year, right? At Contango, we're looking to, grow by, 20 bookings by 20% in 2025. Cool. We can put together a plan with conversion rates and accounts touched and disco to demo to close. This many new hires, this is our perceived number of inbounds. And we could say, hey, we're going to get to 20% growth versus saying we have to get to 50, 60% growth. How much money do we need to get there? So for me, that's been the biggest adjustment, is the way that you actually need to plan. But it's great to not have that, like, it's not optional. We have to get to 3x growth or whatever it may be. Being able to actually look at the reality of the situation and put together a plan that is challenging but attainable, I think is just better for everybody.
Yeah, it is. It's arguably maybe not better for some investors in certain scenarios, and that's why they go for the growth at all costs. But totally. It's a valuation game, right? They're looking to make their equity worth more money so that they can raise another round and sell some of their equity or all of their equity. And that really has nothing to do with building a business. It has to do with enriching the investors. It's really all it has anything to do with. In some cases, in extreme scenarios, raising tons of money like accelerates growth and all this stuff. But more often than not, what I see is you're just buying growth, right? You're like, how much money do we need? Like you said, how much do we need to get this growth? And sometimes you're spending $1 to make $1. And it's like, what are we even doing here? We're just literally rigging the numbers at a certain point. So yeah, it's nice to be able to work for a company where you don't really have to be pressured into hitting these cookie cutter numbers. And you can look at the business and say like, okay, like what can this business do? Instead of like, let's say I want to go get into powerlifting. I'm not going to go to the Gold's Gym downstairs and like look at the biggest dude and be like, that's what I got to put up because I want to be a powerlifter. No, I'm going to like see what I can handle, right? I'm going to like see what makes me tired, what makes me sore, and then work up from there. It's the same thing with like building a healthy business. It's just find numbers that make sense. And yeah, it's better for everybody. But
especially in the business that we're in, right? Which is service deliverability. It's like, it's not only what can sales generate, but like, how much do we need to grow the service deliverability team in order to continue to provide excellent support and service? They got to run parallel. So as you think about growing the business, it's not a software where it's like more revenue, it's the same overhead costs, right? There's more hires needed. There's more efficiencies needed in order to keep gross margins where they are. So for us, it's also like, we might not want to double the business right now because that would mean that we're going to fall apart on the back end of things. So it's a great point. Totally thinking about this from like a company-wide standpoint, not just hitting a revenue number. It's like, how do we put the business in the best position to be successful?
Great point. Because I assume what you're talking about there is churn, right? On the back end.
Yeah.
And you see it all the time. They have to hit this T2, D3. For people who don't know, it means like you're going to triple for 2 years and double your revenue for 3 years. And they get so glued on doing that they will ignore the churn. And then it's like, we just have to hit the sales number. And you don't realize that like by actually accelerating sales right now, you're making all of the churn problems worse when you should pause and fix the leaky bucket before pouring more fuel. Like, it's crazy how backwards it all is. But yeah, most people don't understand why it's like that. And it's literally like that because they are trying to make their equity worth more money. That's the only thing that's the mission there when they do that. But let's get your thoughts on AI in sales over the next, 5-10 years. I don't know what time frame to even ask because 10 years sounds like crazy far.
5 years, people might be like flying around on jetpacks at this rate. So who knows, right?
We might be Martians in 5 years.
I think that for me, when I think about AI in 5 to 10 years, I think it is either going to take your job or it's going to make you exponentially better at your job.
Depending on who you are, or depending on
who you are. Depending on who you are. I think depending on who you are, and like, none of us know. 10 years is so far away. Like imagine 10 years ago talking about like what AI could do today. You would be like, yeah, right.
I just rewatched The Sopranos. And it's so weird looking back at it because that's been a while ago now. It was like early 2000s, right? And it's like that whole show was about how much the world was changing. And watching it now, it's like we had no clue. I could have never imagined where we would have ended up. Yeah, it's weird seeing that.
I think that for, if you're a sales leader or a salesperson that uses spray and pray methods, that doesn't really get an understanding of your customers' needs and their pains, and you're just like pitch slapping and telling them, feature dumping on every single call, that's going to be replaceable, I think.
Yeah.
Now, I think on the other side, if you are thoughtful and you active listen well and you can be solutions based and you're taking from from the top of the funnel, you're taking this hyper strategic approach. I think that all the AI and automation will just make all that so much easier on you. And that's the way that I'm envisioning it. And even beyond like the sales component from a business component, I think that a lot of the stuff that throws challenges businesses ways like implementation of softwares or services, right? I think that will get automated. That becomes far easier than for customers, right? They click a button versus having to have each person in the company go meet with so and so for an hour, right? So I think that it will bring a ton of positive things to not only the sales world but the business world as a whole if it's utilized the right way, right? I think that there definitely will be, unfortunately, some, I don't need, even today, I don't need 5 SDRs to go spray and pray 1,000 emails. There's softwares that can just do that. What I need is somebody who can go and do the detailed research of understanding the account and the role and the org structure, and then make strategic plays to go get in the door and get that meeting. I don't think that ever goes away. I think that we can just become better at that. But for more of like this traditional, like make 100 cold calls, send 100 emails, like go about your day, I think that's easily replaced.
Yeah, I think I heard someone say recently that like AI is probably, it's not replacing salespeople, it's replacing bad salespeople. And that's why, like, when you said like it will, I forget exactly how you said it, but you're like, it will either replace you or it will make you significantly better. And my question was like, do you mean that like maybe one will happen or maybe the other, or like it depends on the person? And I'm with you. It depends on the person, because probably what will happen, average sales team will get a bit smaller. They won't need their bottom, sort of half, because the top half is just going to get exponentially better and more effective and more efficient.
Right.
And, if you think back, I don't know, I saw a random video. I always like sort of relating things to analogies and stuff. I saw a random video of someone giving a haircut in India or whatnot, and he had this like hand pumping clippers that you use. It's not electric, right? You have to like crank it. And it makes me think of just like all these technological innovations. Like if you worked at a barber shop before there were electric, clippers, and then they invented the electric clipper. If you were like, nah, I'm not into that, like not going to do it. Like, well, now you're a guy who can do 3 or 4 haircuts a day, but everyone next to you is doing 20 or
Right.
30, right? And you're out. You're gone. You're going to lose your spot because they can make more money in that chair than you can. So it's the same. Like it's just the same. We invented spreadsheets. People used to count on an abacus with those little beads, those things like, and like, so it's just like, it's just the same. It's just more of the same. It's a tool. And yes, it will replace some jobs, but it's not replacing humans. And I think that's what I go back to. That's sort of what my take on this has evolved to, is like, as long as the AI is being built to be used by a human, you can't say that it's replacing humans. It's
Right.
only replacing us when it's not intended to be used by us. And we will probably have, I don't know, there'll probably be robots and shit that do weird stuff in the world. And that's maybe the thing to be scared of, is like when it's literally just doing stuff without any involvement at all. But as long as what we're talking about is a tool to be used by humans, maybe it means you need less humans to do the job. But I don't think that's the same as replacing humans. Replacing humans
No.
is like, is there's no user, there's no end
Right.
user, right?
Or you have humans that can now focus on more strategic, more creative things. And
Yes.
some of like the
Yes.
kind of mundane tasks are automated. Like how great would
Yeah.
that be, right? Like you can
Yeah.
free up an engineer or a product person to go and spend more time doing X, Y, and Z because this is now automated. You don't have to worry about that anymore. And I think that's where kind of from the business standpoint it evolves.
Yeah, we're living through that now. Some of these futurists like Peter Diamandis, who I watch on YouTube a lot, he's one of Elon Musk's investors and a big money guy, big tech guy, big money guy. And, these guys paint a picture of like what the future should look like with AI. I don't know if they're talking our lifetime or whatnot, but like they paint a picture of this utopia world where basically robots and AI take over everything. They replace our politicians. They replace all of the work that we essentially do. And we get to a point where basically it would be commonplace to go outside and just see robots running around everywhere doing stuff because they're just building the world for us. And, they say we may even evolve to being kind of childish in the future. Maybe not our lifetime, but like if you go far enough into the future, humanity may never grow up because they may not need to at a certain point. There may literally be robots tending to your every need from such a young age, from birth, essentially, right? They're delivering you out of your mother's, womb, and like it can get to that point where basically robots are doing everything. And so they talk about, what's the I'm drawing a blank on universal basic income. And because they say if it's going to replace everyone's jobs, well, we have to somehow charge tax on those robots because they're taking jobs and then distribute money to people. And I'm painting a long-term picture here, but it's sort of similar in sales. It's like eventually so much of the tedious stuff is done for us that we can maybe, for the very first time in many people's lives, take that veil off and figure out what are we actually even interested in? What is our actual talent? Because I would be willing to bet, even though we've found something we're great at in life, if we could do anything with our day, it probably wouldn't be sales. It probably we would be discovering something very, very, very different. And maybe not at this stage in our life, but if it was like that from birth and you never had to necessarily find a way to pay the bills, so to speak, you may have discovered that you're an opera singer. You may have discovered that like you're really good at building like something with your hands, or you may have invented something. And like there's so much probably untapped potential and talent in the world. And I'm going way off topic here, but you kind of reminded me of that. And I think it's an optimistic way to look at a lot of this, and to just think that like, there's lots of downsides. We're getting replaced, this, that, the other thing. But when you think of the big picture of like, could we eventually be living in a world where like no one has to do stupid, dumb, boring stuff because it's just done for us? That's a pretty awesome utopia that we could imagine someday to live in. And if you just dial that back to where we're at in sales, it's the same thing, because we're talking about implementing some AI that can make it so that you don't have to do the worst parts of the job. And so I think that's just a positive way to look at it. Yeah. But all right, I want to get your thoughts here on, a year into VP of sales, and we kind of maybe talked through some of this stuff, and maybe you even want to include director or whatnot, but like, what's been the biggest learning curve for you?
I definitely got a crash course on kind of like being head of revenue, head of sales, those first 2 years at Electric, but I was so green, right? Like I was so focused on just like get to the number, survive, right? Move on to the next month, that type of deal.
Yeah.
But I did learn a lot. And obviously as I spoke about, I learned so much from David Weiner, in our time together. I think now being in the seat, there's a couple of things. One is advocating for yourself and your team to CEO, CFO, and finance. I think that's massively important. I think that if I was in this seat 3-4 years ago, I would be in a meeting. They would say, "Do you think we can hit this number?" And I would say, "Yeah, no problem." Right? We'll grind it out. We'll get there. Now I'm like, well, hold on a second. Let's think about this. Let's think about the number of sales. Let's think about our conversion rates. Let's think about, different contribution channels around revenue, and say, hey, I actually don't think that's possible. And if it is possible, and if we do need to get there, here's what we would need in order to make it possible. We need marketing. We need this number of inbounds. We need these tools, right? So I think advocating on behalf of your team and yourself to the other members of the exec team is a really important piece, but it's also a very fine line, right? Because if I just go in there and say the goal's too high, they're going to say, no, it's not. And then we're going to go our separate ways, be mad at each other, and like, we're not working as a team.
They're going to feel like you're playing for the wrong team.
Right. Versus saying, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I understand the budget that I have to play with. Let me actually show you some like data and analytics and metrics over the last 6 to 8 months that will explain to you why I think that this is a better target than what you presented. In order to do that, you have to know your sales process inside and out. You have to know your how many touches does it take on an outbound, account to get a meeting. You need to understand what your conversion rates are from account to op to disco to demo to align, right? All the way down to close. If you are unknowledgeable about your sales process and your metrics, you're never going to win that conversation around here's why I think that we're going to not hit the number that you think we're going to hit. Um, I am so lucky to have an incredible CEO and an incredible finance team where we're open to work together and figure out what the best thing is for the team and the organization. So we have those back and forth, really honest, upfront conversations with each other. But I think the reason why they are accepting of some of my feedback is because you know your stuff, right? I'm not going in there being like, well, I don't know what this is. I don't know what our ACV is. I don't know how many touches it takes. I don't know our average sales cycle. You got to have all that stuff buttoned up to be able to go in and advocate for yourself and your team in order to get some decisions to fall your way.
That's a huge one, man. I can't remember who I had a similar combo with recently. It might have been Collin from Orem, or it might have been Mark as well. I'm not sure, but we touched on this topic and they brought it up, and we're talking about the notion of like when you get into a VP role and you join the executive team, understanding what team you really work for is like a little bit of a confusing sort of place to be, because on one hand, you want to advocate for your reps, you need to advocate for your reps, and you need to be there to defend them and push back when they want to jack quotas up too high or things like that. You also don't want to go too far in that direction, like you said, right? Because if you do, very quickly, you become the odd man out of the executive team, and you don't feel like you're a part of that team. You feel like you're against that team. And it is really important to remember that the executive team is the team you're on, right?
Yeah, that's your first team.
Yeah, that is your first team, and like everything has to be around that. And so there's this weird like sort of role shifting that you go through when you kind of walk into that conference room and then you go back onto the sales floor. You're kind of switching character because you may be in that conference room pushing back on something, but then you go out onto the sales floor and you hear the team complaining about it, and now you're defending it. And now because you don't want to become the cancer on the team.
No. It's why the VP of sales job is one of the many reasons why it's so challenging, right? Is that you have to be able to go in there and advocate for your team and put people in a position to be successful. That's all we should be doing as sales leaders is, how do I help my team achieve their goals? How do I put them in a position to be successful? Then when you go into the exec meeting, it's how do I make the business successful? How do I make all of you successful? How do we all work together to reach this end goal?
Yeah.
Then you have to go back out on the sales floor and be like, hey guys, change X, Y, and Z is happening. It's going to be great. Even if you just fought like hell to against that change, right? You got to buy in and be a part of the team. And once that exec team makes that decision as an org, internally, you can feel, whatever way you want to feel about it, but you've got to be a team player when you get in front of the team. You got to make sure that you're getting them to buy in. Hiring is so important, especially early stage. Although we are Contango is a 10, 15-year-old company, I say we're 9 months old, right? Because like we're literally getting our hands in here for the first time. The sales team is 9 months old. I got to have guys on my team, and I'm so lucky that I do with Preston and Mike, that are ready to fight. They're down for the cause, and you need those kind of like dogs early on to make sure that like they have your back. They know that if you have their back, they'll have yours. And there's got to be that partnership.
Yeah, I remember when I left doctor.com, I asked a bunch of people to write me like recommendations on LinkedIn, and I had no clue what people would write. Some people don't. Some people don't. There's a few that don't respond. And you're like, maybe I could have done better there. But I remember reading through some of them, and there was one that really particularly like stood out to me, and he was just saying how much I went to bat for them and all that stuff. And like, I never realized until like reading that how much it meant to the team. Because I actually think I was doing it from a selfish point of view, like because it was my own number too. But it was when I left that role that I realized how actually important that is to the people, that they have a perception of that you're going to bat for them, right? And totally. So you almost want them to know that there's an element of that. You don't necessarily want them to know like all the battles that you're fighting and whatnot, and you should pick and choose them. You can't be fighting all of the battles and stuff. But like when your team knows that like you have their back. And it takes time to establish that level of trust. But what I've realized happens there is that when you do then have like a change or something you need to announce with them, they're pretty darn bought in because they trust that like if it really wasn't good, like you would have pushed back. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you get that on that same page with them. And it takes a while to get there, maybe the first year to really earn that trust. Ideally faster, like 90 days to 6 months. I think you're earning some pretty good trust by making some big decisions. But yeah, it goes both ways. But hey, man, what are the growth plans for 2025? Like, obviously, you guys are going to keep acquiring companies. What is the plan on the sales team? Are you guys hiring? Are you going to split the team into like different groups? Like, what's the game plan if you have?
We're figuring all that out. We're figuring a lot of that stuff out. I think that like when we think about growing bookings, we're trying to grow bookings by 20% in 2025. So again, not this triple, double or anything like that. But the plan from a sales perspective is that we want to have one team, one process, all in it together. We're still figuring out service offerings and how all that stuff's going to work.
But we're super excited. Is your sales team managing a book of business? Like, are they going to be the account managers as well?
All new business.
Okay.
We have an account manager team and a VCIO team and all of that. For
are you guys
going
to be taking some of the products and like some of them are new business products, some of them are upsell like later, or have you not even thought of that yet?
So I think that for us, the service offering is going to be a combination of all these different organizations that we end up working with. And for me, I think that there is always opportunity for upsells and things like that for like additional projects and stuff like that. But our main focus of the sales organization is this ongoing support model. So it's the help desk, the security, the software, the on and offboardings, the strategic management, all that type of stuff. That's what our group's going to be focused on, and we are hiring.
Okay, so you're able to keep it relatively simple there.
Yes, so super simple. And from a hiring perspective, we're looking to bring on like at least 3 people in April. So if anybody's out there looking and wants to kind of join this great team, we'd love to talk to you.
For AE?
Yes. And then the plan ideally would be that we're also going to hire 3 more in that would start in Q3 and be ramped up by Q4. So looking to grow the team anywhere between like 3 to 6 people over the next 6 to 7 months here. So going to be a busy and exciting time.
And what's the role? Is it remote? Is it in New York? What's the details there?
It's going to be a remote role. You can work anywhere. We have HQs right now in Tulsa and New York City, but we are a remote team. So wherever you are, if you're, a great seller and want to kind of, what we hope join this rocket ship that we're putting together here, we'd love to talk to you.
And so you're in New York, right?
Yeah, so I'm living in Jersey now, but
that's right.
Going to the New York City office. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so you're in Jersey, and so you're working remote, but it's like hybrid. Like you have an office in New York.
We have an office if you want to go in. Like I try to go in like once a week just to kind of be with the team. Right now, our 2 executives our 2 account executives are living in Tulsa. But for this next batch of hiring, we're open to wherever you are.
Fully remote. Cool. Well, I can probably send some people over your way. I know.
Yeah, please.
There will probably be people listening to this episode. So where can they go if they want to reach out to you about the roles?
Yeah, so you can come directly to me. My email is mg@contangoit.com, contangoit.com.
And they can also check you out on LinkedIn. I got in the show notes, we'll have your Twitter or X now as well. And anything else that you want to plug in there? Any last thing you want to promote?
No, super just honored and excited to be here with you. I learned so much from you in my early SinglePlatform days that has carried with me through my career. So when we kind of reconnected and talked about doing this, I was so pumped. So thank you so much for having me on. Super cool experience. Just a big thank you.
Well, it's an honor, man. It goes both ways. It's been a lot of fun doing this sort of little SinglePlatform reunion tour, so to speak, on the podcast. And I mean, there's so many more people I can meet with. I'm trying to mix them in so it doesn't just become a SinglePlatform podcast exclusively.
Cool thing is there's a lot of great people from there. So there's a lot of great options.
It's so much stuff. I mean, there's so many people that have moved on to just doing incredible things. I've lost track of probably so many of them. But yeah, man, so proud of you. It's been awesome to watch the journey from afar. It's been great to catch up. We'll have to, I'm in Jersey too, so we'll have to maybe catch up sometime. But
please, that'd be great, man. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks again for having me on.
Likewise, man. Take care.